everyone understands the message and you continue to excel in the efforts that you give. I do want to, one of the things, as I'm going through, one of the things that was highlighted was the ADUs, which, you know, I've been advocating for a long time here. And on page 174, prioritize projects with 10% or more ADA units when considering financial assistance, et cetera, and facilitated a pipeline of nearly 100 new ADA units. Could you expound upon that pipeline of nearly 100 new? Because I thought we only had 33 at one point.
Through the chair to the council, I think the answer is somewhat twofold. So as you're referring to accessory dwelling units, I know in Commissioner Antanavica's report, he had referenced about 30 or so, and that figure was specifically for FY26. Okay. So in highlighting FY26 accomplishments, it was 30. In terms of year-to-date, or not year-to-date, but I guess since inception of us passing the ordinance, which was back in 2024, we're up to about 70 now. I believe at least 14 have been completed, but that's kind of the distinction of maybe because we had submitted an economic development report recently that talked about the full duration of since we've adopted ADUs as an ordinance as a city versus the commissioner's report, which was highlighting those that were permitted in FY26. But to the second part of your question, the reference in our report on prioritizing housing projects through the trust fund that have 10% ADA, so not ADUs, but ADA accessibility. So through the trust fund, we have 105 units now in that pipeline of affordable housing trust fund supported projects in terms of the ADA accessible units. So
Mayor Cooper on that, must have dyslexia tonight. But it was interesting, I read a report, I read an article about a report, I didn't see it, it came out Wednesday, from Boston Indicators. It's a research arm from Boston Foundation in Abundant Housing, Massachusetts. And it was interesting because their stats said for 2025 that the Boston led the list of communities that permitted the most ADUs last year. City Hall took in 69 applications and 44 permits. Plymouth was next at 42 and 34, followed by Lawrence at 44 and 32, and Nantucket with 27 applications and 27 permits. So we wouldn't have met that threshold based on what you just told me for last year?
Yeah, through the chair, I'd have to understand what specific time period they were looking, if they were looking at like a calendar year 2025, or if they were looking at FY26. I know to the earlier question, and I looked at this data just today, that Commissioner Antanavica was correct. In FY26, there were 30. So maybe they were referring to the calendar year, and maybe we were just under 30. But I would say that our total production for ADUs, when you think about having it just since 2024, it's really solid. You might remember back when we were talking about the zoning framework for ADUs and looking at other municipalities who had it for some time. Some of them have had, you know, ordinances on the books that technically allow for ADUs to be created, but they've only, you know, done like one a year for several years. So seeing, you know, the volume that we've seen since 2024, I'd say that's very successful. And we do, you know, I don't know about Abundant Housing specifically reaching out to us, but I know that we submitted some data recently on housing production, including ADUs, to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and fairly recently to Mass Inc., I think, too. So if they were pulling from one of those sources, we should have been represented in some way, but it could be just how they were stratifying the particular timeline that they were looking at.
One of the things that they're saying has been difficult for some of the other communities is the regulations, which clearly I think we've gone beyond that and probably much further ahead with that.
Through the chair to the counselor, I would say at this point the parameters of our accessory dwelling unit framework in the zoning ordinance is very consistent with what's asked for in the Affordable Homes Act. Ironically, when you look at some of the things like, the square footage and bedroom count and some of those dimensional things, we had done that, prior to the Affordable Homes Act coming into place. And a lot of the dimensional things were very similar. So I don't know if they were looking at what other communities have done for the basis of the dimensional requirements or parameters they put in the Affordable Homes Act. The one thing that we did have to amend, which we did, as you remember, is the owner occupancy restriction that we eliminated. But I would say right now, most of certainly the majority of our ADUs have been allowed by right. The most consistent or most common reason for a special permit that we've seen, which has been maybe a dozen or so, has been based on size. So where you do have maybe an existing building structure, like a lot of our 2 families and 3 families have a floor plate of about 1,200 square feet. You could renovate an attic potentially for a 3rd unit if it's a 2-family. And so our maximum size that's by right without requiring special permit is 900 square feet. So that's kind of like what we've been seeing in those requests for special permits to the planning board, which has largely been supported as well by the planning board, has been primarily due to total square footage.